So, now the last 5 chapters of Judges doesn't have any judges in it. What happens was that Samson was the last judge. But what the last 5 chapters do is show how far gone Israel went, how far they went down the rabbit hole of idolatry, and because there was no king. They were supposed to be Jesus was supposed to be the king. God was supposed to be the king, Yahweh. But they all went their own way. And when everybody goes their own way, then it's anarchy, and everybody does what they want to do. And sin was rampant. So 17. Okay, so what we're doing is, where's Samson? Samson passed away. And so from now, how come this thing isn't working? There it is. Well, it started working. Oh, well. Anyway, the last part there before Samuel comes on the scene when he gets older, then that's the time of the judges. And they didn't have anybody to lead them. It wasn't until Samuel, the prophet, he started getting Israel back on the right track. But it wasn't until Samuel came. So now they're just in complete anarchy. They're doing what they want. And so these next chapters are going to show how bad it got. So let's start off with chapter 17, verse 1. Now there was a man from the mountain of Ephraim whose name was Micah. Now, Micah is a contracted form of Michaelu, which literally means who is like Yahweh. And so it's a magnificent theological name. But when we start going through his life here, you'll see that there's a disconnect between his name and what he practices. So it's a cultural problem. They're just getting so far away. It's like when we have a generation of people that wear the name of Christ, who have a Christian stamped on their social media. They wear little crosses, but their lifestyles are completely pagan. They just have a form of godliness, but they deny any power. You always see people wearing little crosses, and you can ask them, "Oh, you're a Christian?" They go, "Oh, well, no, this is just a jewelry. This is what I found." I had a boss one time, and he had a little Star of David. And I go, "Oh," I said, "Oh, you're Jewish?" And he goes, "No." I said, "I'm not Jewish." I said, "Why do you have a Star of David?" And I said, "That's a Jewish symbol." And he goes, "Well, my name is David, so this is the star. That's I'm the star, David." I said, "No, that's not what that means." I said, "If people see that on you, they're going to think you're Jewish." So anyway, but he wore it for a while more, and then I noticed that he just stopped wearing it. But it was funny, though. He didn't want people to think he was Jewish. Okay, so let's go to verse 2. Okay, now we're talking about the life of Micah. And he said to his mother, 1,100 pieces of silver that were taken from you, on which you uttered curse, and even spoke it in my hearing. Here is the silver with me. I took it. And his mother said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my son." So this is a toxic family drama. Micah walks into his mother's tent, confesses that he stole all this money. He gives her the money, and he says, "I'm the one that stole it from you." Is there a thing up there? Yeah. So he tells his mother, he says, "I'm the one that stole all this money from you. And the money that you were screaming and cursing about, I am the one that stole it, and here it is. I'm giving it back." Now it's 1,100 pieces of silver. Where do we see that before? Back in chapter 16, when the Philistines offered Delilah 1,100 pieces of silver. And so those were the pagans. So now we see that Israel is falling into the same stuff as the Philistines. And the same exact greed. And it corrupted all the homes. All of Israel was just corrupted. And then she says, which is funny, may you be blessed by the Lord, my son. What she was doing was she was sanitizing his thievery, because she had cursed before, saying a curse on the person that stole my money. And now she's saying, well, the Lord's going to bless you. The Lord bless you. So it was just a superstition. And that's what she was doing, a superstitious blessing. So verse 3. So when he had returned the 1,100 pieces of silver to his mother said, I had wholly dedicated silver from my hand to the Lord for my son, to make a carved image and a molded image. Now therefore I'll return it to you. So she's just showing the absolute spiritual blindness. Here she's saying that she's dedicating the silver to the Lord, and she's going to go make a carved image with it. It's like, she's going to make an idol out of this money. She says, I'm going to celebrate the Lord, but I'm going to make an idol out of it. So it's called psychological schizophrenia or theological schizophrenia. She's claiming to honor God, but she's breaking the first two commandments. Thou shalt not have no other gods before me, and thou shalt not make yourself any graven images. But she's saying she's doing this for the Lord. But okay, then there's this word that I came up with, and it's a toxic blending of the holy things and pagan things, and because she wanted God's protection, but she wanted a visual convenience for idolatry. So people do that. They want a physical thing. Instead of worshiping God, God is invisible. You have to trust him by faith. He's not here. You'll never see the Father, even when you get to heaven. You'll see Jesus, because he's in a bodily form, but the Holy Spirit and the Father are spirits, so you won't see them. But people want something solid to worship, something solid to focus their attention on, like the shroud of Turin. They're all saying, "Oh, this is Jesus," and and they all start praying to it. And the Catholic Church has saints. They have statues of all these saints and stuff. They want something solid that they could see, something visual. In Haiti, what they do is that the Christianity came there, so they accepted Christianity, but what they do is they combined it with their culture, their voodoo, and different rites. And so it doesn't even look like Christianity, but they're praying to Jesus, but they're using other rituals and stuff. So they're blending things together. The Catholic Church did that when they first started under Constantine. What they did was Constantine made it the religion of the state, and everybody had to be a Catholic. Well, when you make everybody being a Catholic, then you're going to get everybody else in there. So they started getting all their pagan beliefs in there. And well, enough said about that. I don't want to get into that too much, because there's a lot of Catholic brothers and sisters, but the Catholic Church started a blend of pagan and Christianity. Let's go to verse 4. Then he returned the silver to his mother, and his mother took 200 pieces of silver and gave them to the silversmith, and he made it into a carved image, a molten image, and it was in the house of Micah. So she took 200 pieces of silver, and she gave them to a silversmith, and he made a little idol for her so she could worship this little idol. Well, she was compromising, because before she said, I'm going to take these 100 pieces of silver, and I'm going to dedicate it to the Lord. Well, she only 200. She kept the rest of herself. and she kept it in the house of Micah. So this house of Micah is going to play a role later on, but they're starting to put idols in there. They're starting to get a collection of idols in there. Okay, 17 verse 5. The man Micah had a shrine, and he made an ephod and household idols, and he consecrated one of his sons who became his priest. So he started this homemade religion. He was just making it up. He had a private shrine, and that's literally the house of God. So he's saying, this is a house of God. He manufactured an ephod. That's a counterfeit version of the high priest's sacred garment. So he made his own thing. And household idols, he had a lot of idols all over inside the house. And then to complete this custom church, he took one of his own sons and consecrated him as a priest. And so he had idols, and he consecrated his son as a priest. He can't do that. That's contrary to the Bible, contrary to the Torah. The priest could only come from the lineage of Aaron and the tribe of Levi. He was in the tribe of Ephraim, so he couldn't be a priest. Micah had created a customized, consumer-driven, completely counterfeit experience right in his own living room. Sometimes the modern churches do the same thing. They try to make their own little counterfeit religion. They have seeker-sensitive churches. They have self-serving enterprises. They care more about the money coming in than they care about preaching the gospel. And there's a lot of churches that do that. But he wanted a church that was local, convenient, and didn't challenge his morality. So it allowed him to run things his own way. So that's what he did. He made his own religion, but he claimed that it was God. But it was just false. Okay, chapter 17, verse 6. In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. So this is what they did. They just did what they felt was right. They didn't look at the Torah. They didn't go to the Levites. They did everything they did was what they. It was all subjective. If it felt good, we do it. It's the same as sort of the way it happens today. That if it feels good, it can't be wrong. There was a song about that too, about some lady that, I don't know, I forget. It was a pop song about some lady. If it feels good, then it has to be right, But it's not, There was no absolute truth. I don't know what the song is. I forget. You know what the song was?
Yeah, if loving you is wrong, I don't want to be right.
Yeah. So anyway, so there was no absolute truth. Everybody was doing their own thing, and that's what Israel had gotten to a point. And the corruption went every place. So let's go to verse 7 and 8. Now there was a young man from Bethlehem in Judah, the family of Judah. He was a Levite, and he was staying there. The man departed from the city of Bethlehem in Judah to stay where he could find a place. Then he came to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, as he journeyed. Okay, so he was from Bethlehem. He was a Levite. But Levites weren't supposed to be roaming around. What they did was they had 48 cities, and they were supposed to be teachers in that city. Spread out throughout all of Israel. There was all these different cities where people could go and learn, go on the Sabbath and learn about Yahweh, and learn about the Torah, learn about what's right and what's wrong. Well, now they're just wandering around. Well, this guy, this young Levite, he was unemployed, homeless, and wandering the countryside looking for a paycheck. He was what they call a mercenary minister. He was just out for hire. It just shows how completely collapsed the whole system got. The whole religious system got, how the people got, everything else. So let's go to 9, verses 9 and 10. And Micah said to him, "Where do you come from?" So he said, "I am a Levite from Bethlehem of Judah. I am going to stay where I can find a place." Micah said to him, "Dwell with me and be my father and priest to me, and I will give you 10 shekels of silver per year, a suit of clothes, and your subsistence." So the Levi went in. So Micah interviewed this traveler, found out he was a Levite, and he said, "Man, I hit the religious jackpot." He says, "Now I got a real Levite to be my priest with my idols and stuff." He said, "This is perfect." So he upgraded from a homemade cult and hired a professional. The contract with this Levite was 10 shekels of silver per year. That was a base salary. A suit of clothes, that was a clothing allowance, and subsistence, which is a free meal and housing. So he sold out his tribe, sold out for financial security, for a corporate benefits package. And so that's what he's doing. He found some place where he could go and earn money instead of staying in the cities that they were supposed to stay in, and the people were supposed to be given tithes to keep them supported. Well, the people aren't given tithes anymore because everybody's doing what's right in their own eyes. So the Levites are sort of just wandering around trying to make what they can. So as long as he was getting that direct deposit, he was staying there. So verse 11 and 12. Then the Levite was content to dwell with the man, and the young man became like one of the sons to him. So Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in the house of Micah. So the Levite was content. He was content with the arrangement, living in a house full of idols, and he compromised his ordination for room and board. So Micah consecrates him. That's a ritual that it's supposed to be done in the temple. He was taking the place of Aaron, and you can't consecrate. You can't do that. So this minister loves the salary. He loves his home. He's just all content now. There are ministers today that love their salary, and they do not speak the truth, but it's because it's a business venture to them. Let's see how big we can make this church, how much money I can make, and let's buy another jet. Oh, God wants me to buy this other jet. And I forget what the minister's name was, but he was telling the people that God wants me to get this new jet. Was that? Yeah, Kenneth Copeland, yeah. He already had a jet, but he says, "God told me I need to get this new jet, so you guys give me your money, give me your tithes, and you'll get a blessing from God." I mean, and people believe it though, or they give prayer cloths, and he wipes his head and says, "Okay, this is holy now. You give me so much money, and I'll give you this." Or, they're just so corrupt. But people buy it. Why? Because it tickles their ears, and 2, it's something visual. And so if they get a cloth that was blessed by this, this is it, so I'll put a little shrine in my house. This is a cloth that came from this, this pastor, And but they do that, and there's people that do that. God's not mocked, and eventually things are going to come to roost. I don't know when. It might be in the afterlife, or it might be before, but things happen. It's like, what was that? Jimmy Swaggart. Jimmy Swaggart was a good minister. I loved his singing. I mean, I like his songs. And he was a good minister, but he was on the side doing things, and finally he got caught. And his ministry just went down the tubes. It's trying to come up, but his son's trying to build it up, but it just came to roost. You only can do it so far. Your sins will find you out. Okay, so here's the last verse in this chapter, verse 13. Then Micah said, "Now I know the Lord will be good to me, since I have a Levite as a priest." He's delusional. Here he has all these idols in the place. They're worshiping these idols, and he has his hired gun priest, and why would the Lord bless that? He's doing everything against what the Lord teaches. But he believed that, well, I have a Levite now, so everything must be right. So now we're going to go to chapter 18. Yeah. And, okay, let me read verse 1, and then we'll have some slides up there. Okay, chapter 18, verse 1. In those days there was no king in Israel. In those days the tribe of Danites was seeking an inheritance for themselves to dwell in. For until that day their inheritance had not fallen to them among the tribes of Israel. Okay, so what happens? Dan, okay, I wish this thing was here. Dan was right here before. That's what God gave Dan. God gave Dan that area right there. But they didn't conquer it. They instead of trusting the Lord, they did not conquer it. They got scared. So what did they do? There was people living here in ships, so they took them over and started living on the boats. And they became fishermen and stuff like that. They're living on the boats. So then they decided, well, we need to get some land. So they sent spies up here, found a peaceful area, and they conquered that. And so then eventually they spread this way into the sea, and they were known as the sea people. But they didn't conquer what they were supposed to conquer. Now they found big cities there. It's called Tel Dan. A tel is a raised mound, and so they did archaeology there. Okay. These are artifacts from Tel Dan, and they're from different countries from around the Mediterranean. So it's proving that Dan was a seafaring people, and they found pottery and inscriptions and all kinds of all the different stuff from different places around the Mediterranean, because they were traders and fishermen and stuff. And so a tell is a mound or a small hill formed by centuries of accumulated debris from repeated human settlements built on the same site. So the Tel Dan, which was the mound of Dan, where the city of Dan was, that's where they found a lot of seafaring stuff. And so it was archaeological evidence that confirmed that they were seafaring people. They became very idolatrous. In fact, they became so bad that God doesn't even mention them in the book of Revelation. He doesn't even mention them. When they have the 144,000 Jews, they picked the 144,000 Jews from each 12,000 from each tribe to go out and preach the gospel, preach that the Messiah is coming. Dan isn't there. Dan isn't even mentioned. So they don't. God just eliminated Dan. First of all, they didn't conquer the land that God told them to conquer, and they should have did that, and God would have just gave it to them. But they were too scared, And they said, oh, these people are just too mighty for us. So they went on to the sea, and then they went and conquered some peaceful land up in the top, way at the top. So that's what it does refer to. A lot of times it refers to Israel as from Dan down to, to Judea. And it refers that way because Dan was the highest thing up there, but it wasn't supposed to be. Dan was supposed to be down at the bottom there. So, and let's see. What else? Was there one more? I think. Oh, yeah. Okay, and then right here it says Dan conquers Laish. Well, Laish was that peaceful place, and we'll get into that. It was a peaceful place, and they didn't have any weapons. They didn't have anything. They were just a peaceful country, and that's what they attacked, and that's that little piece up there on the top, and so that's what they got. Okay, let's go to verse 2. So the children of Dan sent 5 men of their family from the territories, men of valor from Zorah and Eshtaol, to spy out the land and search it. They said to them, go and search the land. So they went to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. So this is the same Micah with the idols. And so they're going up north, they're traveling up north so that they could find some land so that the tribe of Dan could go up there. So this is the same Micah that had this counterfeit boutique religion that he made up, and with the compromised Levite. Okay, let's go to verse 3. While they were at the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of a young Levite. They turned aside and there said to him, who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What do you have here? Okay, they recognized his voice. Now, why would they do that? How could they recognize his voice? Well, because he was a Levite from Bethlehem in Judea, and they had a certain accent. And so they recognized the accent. And so then they asked these questions, who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? These are questions that believers should be asking when they find themselves in a place of spiritual compromise. The Levite belonged at the tabernacle in Shiloh, serving the living God, not acting as a hired gun preacher for an idol-worshiping family. And so that's what he was doing. Let's see, and there was 5 minutes. Yeah. So that's the young Levite, and there's the 1, 2, 3, 4. AI missed the person. There was supposed to be 5 people there, but I guess they counted the Levite as 5. And then those are all the idols. See all the idols in the back? There's idols every place. They had so many idols in there. But the men weren't concerned about the idols. They were just talking to the Levite. And so now in verse 4, the Levite is talking now. He said to them, thus and so Micah did for me. He has hired me. I have become his priest. Okay, now he's not talking about God anymore. He's talking, Micah hired me. He did this for me. And so it's all Micah did this and not God did this for me. So he's completely compromised. He didn't have a calling. He had a career. He wasn't serving God. He was serving his wallet. I don't know. It's just upsetting the way people, the way they, how far down they went. Okay, let's go to verse 5 and 6. So they said to him, please inquire of God that we may know whether the journey on which we go will be prosperous. And the priest said to them, go in peace. The way in which you go is befitting before the Lord. So here the Danites, they wind up asking this counterfeit priest, oh, give us what the Lord wants us to do. So he just gives them an answer that they want to hear. Go in peace. You'll have prosperity, and he affirms what they want to hear. He doesn't check the Bible or the Torah. He just tells you what he wants them to hear. A real pastor will tell you what God says. What he'll do is he won't tell you what you want to hear. He'll tell you what the Bible says. Pastor Joe, if you ask him for advice on something, he'll either give you a scripture, he'll ask you to pray about it, and then he'll talk to you about it. He won't say, he won't tell you what you want to hear. He'll tell you, go to the Bible, hear these scriptures, read these scriptures, pray about it, and then come back and talk to me. And then, if they come back, he'll say, did you read the scriptures? What did you get out of it? And he's very biblical orientated, which is good. And that's what you want a pastor to be. You want a pastor to always refer to the Bible, not referring to something else. So we keep praying that he comes back. Okay, now verse 7. So the 5 men departed and went to Laish, and they saw the people who were there, and how they dwelt safely in the manner of the Sidonite, quiet and secure. There was no ruler in the land who might put them to shame for anything. They were far from the Sidonites and had no ties with anyone. So they come there and they find this town, and it's way up north, and it's quiet and secure, and there's no rulers to put them to shame. Now, what does that mean? No rulers to put them to shame. That means that they had nobody to tell them right from wrong, to tell them you're not doing the right thing. So they were in complete moral anarchy. Their culture was devoid of restraints. And so they just did what was right in their own eyes. They didn't have anybody over them to tell them what's right and what's wrong. And, okay. So they finally got 5 spies. And they're looking down on this village, and it's a peaceful village. And they say they don't have any weapons. They're just living their own life and doing their own thing. He says, we could take them. Okay, verse 8 to 10. Then the spies came back to their brethren at Zorah and Eshtaol, and their brethren said to them, what is your report? So they said, arise, let us go up against them, for we have seen their land, and indeed it is very good. Would you do nothing? Do not haste to go and enter to possess the land. When you go, you will come to a secure people in a large land, for God has given it unto your hands, the place where there is no lack for anything that is on the earth. So they come back really hyped up, saying, God has given it to us. Now, if they were really doing God's will, and say that the town had soldiers every place and big high walls and stuff like that, if God was with them, they could have taken it anyway. But they saw it as easy pickings, and it was good land. And so they said, yeah, let's go up there and take it on. God's going to be with us on this one, because it was easy. Just because circumstances seem to line up doesn't make it the will of God. A lot of times people, they'll say, I'm going to buy this new car, because the guy was really nice and it's a good price and it's God's will. Did you pray about it? No. Did you talk about it before to other people, in church or anything, saying, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? Did you talk to the pastor? No. Did you pray about it? No. They just do it. They say, well, it must be God's will. A lot of times when they see a door open, they say, "Oh, it must be God's will," and walk right in, instead of praying about it first. Because sometimes an open door leads to pits. So they mistook a vulnerable, unsuspecting pagan village for a divine blessing. They're saying God must be with it. Okay, verses 11 to 13. And 600 men of the family of the Danites went from there, from Zorah and Ishkal, armed with weapons of war. And they went up and encamped at Jearim in Judah. Therefore they called the place Mahanaim. Dan, they called the place to Dan to this day. There it is, west of Jearim. I wrote it down phonetically so I could get it. And they passed from there to the mountains of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. So they sent the 600 men with weapons along with their families, and they march out, but they take a pit stop at the house of Micah. Ironically, the Ark of the Covenant will rest there later in the future, at where the house of Micah is. So they head straight to the back of the house of Micah. Why? Because they don't just want the new land; they want Micah's customized religion to legitimize their conquest. So they're going to go get a blessing from this Levite. So verse 14 to 17. Then the 5 men who had gone to spy out the country of Laish answered and said to their brethren, "Do you know that there are in the houses an ephod, household idols, carved images, and molded images? Now therefore consider what you do." So they turned aside there and came to the house of the young Levite, to the house of Micah, and greeted him. The 600 men armed with their weapons of war, who were of the children of Dan, stood by the entrance of the gate. Then the 5 men who had gone to spy the land went up. Entering there, they took the carved image, the ephod, and the household idols, and the molded image, and the priest stood at the entrance of the gate with 600 men who were armed with weapons of war. So they go and they're stealing everything. They're stealing all the idols. They're stealing all the stuff that he made, the ephod and all this stuff. They're stealing it. They're actually stealing it. They're burglarizing Micah's shrine because they want to make this false religion their religion to bless them. So if God could be stolen, he's not a God worth serving. But they stole these gods, and they said, "Oh, now these gods will be going with us." Okay, verse 18 to 20. When these went to Micah's house and took the carved images, the ephod and the household idols and the mold images, the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" And they said to him, "Be quiet, put your hand over your mouth and come with us. Be our father and a priest to us. Is it better for you to be a priest to the house of one man or to a priest of a tribe and a family of Israel?" So the priest's heart was glad, and he took the ephod, the household idols, the carved images, and took his place among the people. So the Danites offer him a promotion. They're saying, "Why be a minister of a small church when we could be a minister of a whole big giant mega church?" And that's what they did. He said, why be in this one little house when you could have a whole tribe that you're the priest of? And so the priest was glad. I mean, it was a career advancement. Even though he was worshiping idols, not worshiping the true God, and his whole theology was just turned upside down. But it was for upward mobility, and so now he's a priest for a whole tribe. So he's made it. He's made it big time. So verses 21 and 24. Then they turned and departed, and put the little ones, the livestock, and the goods in front of them. When they were a good distance from the house of Micah, the men who were in the house near Micah's house gathered together and overtook the children of Dan. And they called out to the children of Dan. So they turned their face and said to Micah, "What ails you, that you have gathered such a company?" So he said to them, "You have taken away my gods, which I made and the priest, and you have gone away. Now, what more do I have? How can you say to me, 'What ails you?'" So Micah realized he was robbed. He said he'd been robbed. And so evidently the town used Micah's house became the church of the whole town. So now the town is all up in arms, and they're going to meet Dan, and they're saying, "Why did you take all this stuff? You've taken all of our idols. You've taken our priest." So now in verse 25 and 26. And the children of Dan said to him, "Do not let your voice be heard among us, lest anger fellows fall upon you, and you lose your life with the lives of your household." Then the children of Dan went their way, and when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his house. So might makes right. So they had a big army, and Micah didn't have, he had a small army, so Micah just turned around and went back home. There was no appeal to the law of God, no appeal to justice. The Danites basically tell Micah, "Shut up or we'll kill you." And so Micah just turned around. He realized he was outgunned, so he went home. So this is the way it was at that time. Everybody was doing what was right in their own eyes. There was no king. There was no judge over them. There was nobody to tell them right from wrong. And that's what these last few chapters are going to be talking about, how bad it was becoming. So let's go to verse 27 to 29. So they took the things Micah had made, and the priest whom he had learned to have, and went to Laish, to a people quiet and secure, and they struck them with the edge of the sword and burned the city with fire. There was no deliverer, because it was far from Sidon, and they had no ties to anyone. It was in the valley that belonged to Beth Rohab. So they rebuilt the city and dwelt there, and they called the name of the city Dan, after the name Dan of their father, who was born to Israel. However, the name of the city was formerly Laish. So the Danites slaughtered these peaceful people, even though they weren't serving God either. They were doing what was right in their own eyes anyway, but they slaughtered them. And this became the northernmost marker of Israel. And in the Bible it refers to from Dan to Beersheba, because they were saying how far Israel was. But remember, this city was built on a foundation of theft, murder, compromise, and adultery. It became a monument to Israel's spiritual failure. Okay, verse 30 to 31. Then the children of Dan set up for themselves the carved images, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, he and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the captivity of the land. So they set up for themselves Micah's carved images, which he made, all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. So anyway, so now we learned the guy's name. The Levite's name is Jonathan. And so we didn't know that before. It was just called the young Levite, but his name is Jonathan. And his genealogy is he's the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh. Now, in many ancient manuscripts, the structure context dictates that this name was actually Moses. The letter Nun was suspended by later scribes to change Moses to Manasseh to protect the reputation of the great lawgiver. if this is the case, this apostate priest was the actual grandson of Moses. So when they took over the city or the town, they set up idols and were worshiping idols. And so this grandson became a hired priest serving idols. Godliness is not passed through DNA. I mean, you could have a godly person and their children wind up becoming God knows what. God has no grandchildren either. You have to become a child of God. You can't sneak in on your father's or your mother's coattails. You have to make the decision yourself. Everybody has to make the decision themselves. There's no you can't say, well, I was. In fact, a lot of these people that wear these little Christian symbols, you ask them if they're Christian, you go, yeah, I'm a Christian. I said, oh, what church you go to? Oh, I don't go to church. I said, do you believe in Jesus? They go, no, but I'm a Christian. I was born in the United States. I'm a Christian. It's a Christian nation, so I'm a Christian. I said, well, that doesn't work that way. So anyway, this place in Dan, they typified what was happening all over Israel. There was nobody that was serving God. Well, God always has a remnant. I found that out, that God always has a remnant. But the majority of people in Israel were not worshiping God. They were worshiping idols. And they're all doing what was right in their own eyes. The strongest were making the rules. Now, later on, when the Israel was divided into two, Jeroboam, centuries later, set up golden calves in the same location. So there are some locations, well, I don't know if I should get into that, but okay, demons are real. There are real demons. There are real fallen angels, and they do set up territories. The Bible's clear on that. It shows like the angel of Persia or the king of Persia, the demon of Persia. They have different domains, different territories, and stuff. And so this territory of Dan just was so bad and theologically corrupt that centuries later it still kept on being corrupt by the kings of Israel. Not the kings of Judea, but the kings of Israel. Anyway, that's the end of that chapter. Now, the next 3 chapters are going to be the same thing. They're going to be telling different stories of how corrupt Israel got. And so, let's have a word of prayer. Heavenly